what makes structural dynamics a little bit different from other models? I hope I say this with grace. It's because it's more inclusive. So I have a model from my family therapy days of how to deal with individuals who are in human systems and come alone. I have a model for that, for how to do that. I have a model for people who are in intimate systems, couples. I have a model for corporate couples, and corporate couples are any two people who share the same goals, who are basically wrangling about how to get there and the language they use in getting there. I have a model for families. I have a model for coaches who coach executives. I have a model in the making for how you intervene in large organizations. And so what makes structural dynamics different is it says that all models follow a very simple set of rules. That there has to be a theory of the thing. What is the entity that you are investigating or intervening in? It has to have, in that theory, there has to be some idea of how that entity evolves over time. And change is, you have to have a theory of change that explains how organizations of all kinds change and grow over time. And then you have to have a theory of practice. And we are practitioners, most of us here. How do you intervene? I've created a lot of confusion around maybe what is the difference between a theory of practice and a model of practice. It's a really important distinction. The model of practice is what you actually do in the room. The theory of practice comes from the systemic interaction and interplay of the theory of thing and theory of change, your general theory, right? And out of the integration, the synthesis of those three theories, you have a theory of practice. You have a practice model, And the practice model is what you do in the room. What is the room? The room is a it's a physical and geographic entity. It's a physical space, but it is also a metaphoric space. And so what I mean by reading the room, and the room is a conversational space, the metaphor of space, a conversational space in which people with a shared outcome meet and talk and usually, and they do. And why do they? Because they have different behavioral profiles and because they speak different basic languages. So let me use that as a leap to what is the language of structural dynamics. I don't really know how to say this, but I kind of believe it now. I think where we have taken structural dynamics is to a point where we've explained reasonably well to be altered and grown through model building, but at this stage it works pretty well, a language, a rather complete language for understanding the nature of all communication. And so here's that language. It says that, that there are three levels of structure in communication. The basic structure is the action mode. The words of the four basic vocal acts that all people in all systems use to communicate with one another. And the proposition is that there are only four. There are four and only four vocal acts that people use in all communication. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about teams, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about organizations, it doesn't matter what kind of organization. The conversation between a coach and an executive, between an executive and his team, and so on. Four basic core moves, actions. You can move, you can follow, you can oppose, and you can bystand. Second level of structure, we don't just speak these vocal acts, we speak them in a distinct language. And each of us not only prefers one or the other of these moves. People are movers, people are followers, people are opposers, and people are bystanders, essentially in their basic profile, but they speak in a language. And there are three languages: the language of affect, the language of power, and the language of meaning. Now, things are getting more interesting because you can have a move, follow, oppose, or bystand in each of those three languages. Diana was moving in meaning, but almost consistently. Doug, as I listen to his language and the word empathy, so what that suggested to me was that Doug operates maybe at the interface between meaning and affect. Right? That's what empathy means to me. So it's listening to your language. We don't only speak these four basic moves in the language of affect, power, and meaning. We are regulated by three different control systems. Right? We're now on level 3. Open, closed, random. Three different kinds of systems, different kinds of the use of feedback loops, right, to regulate the behavior of people in the system, including their language, which is the key behavior that occurs in interacting human systems. So let's stick with just the moves. You can have a move in affect, or power, or meaning. You can have a closed system move in affect, or meaning, or power. Are we following it? Now what have you got? You've got 4. Move, oppose, follow, bystand. 3 more. The language. Open, close, and affect, power, and meaning. 3 more. Open, close, and random. 4 times 3 times 3. 36. 36 basic communicative acts. Only 36. Now think about that. If that's right, we have basically a code for all communication. Right? And you could be in a room, and if you were able to code those 36 acts, which we tried to do in ODEC, a machine that could actually operate a code what's going on in the room, and code those 36 acts, you would begin to see, guess what? What we were talking about before, along the line here, different sequences. What's a sequence? Here's a sequence. Let's set the table for dinner. What is that? A move. I don't think so. I think it's too early. What's that?
Oppose.
An oppose.
That's a move.
That's a move.
That was a bystand.
Do you think she keeps her eye on me? Yes.
That's a good thing.
Okay, we're not done. So we've had a move, we've had an oppose. Right? I'm going to put it in the context of a family or a team. It doesn't make it makes no difference. The actual entity or context does not matter. It's the same structure of communication. So one of the kids said, "I think that is right." What's that? That's a follow to the original mover. When that's a sequence. Codable. You could actually code it. When you have sequences that repeat themselves in a human system, guess what you got in that family? You got a problem between you got a pattern which is a repetitive structure that repeats itself over and over again in a system, and you've got a broken structure in a system. easy to diagnose. I have just read that room, and reading the room is coding the behavior in the room, looking for sequences that turn into patterns, and when you've got patterns of that kind, you've got a dysfunctional human system.
Why is that?
Why is that?
Why?
Because the child in that system, the follower in that system, is torn between the two parents, right? Is following one, which undermines the other, etc., etc. Just look at the dynamics.
And it's stuck.
It's
too.
stuck, it
And-
never
and
changes.
it doesn't,
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't
stuck.
change. You see
Yeah,
the pattern
it's
over
the
and over.
Always
repetition.
resist the move.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not
Right?
gonna set the table.
Yeah.
And so you can read these patterns in any system if you can code the behavior using structural dynamics. There's a fourth level of structure, and that's the structure that's down below. And those are stories. Behind people's behavior are stories. And structural dynamics has identified, somewhere, there are two or three very important ones, I'll name them, and another set, very, very important. So here are the essential ones. At the base of all behavior in human systems, I think, is the childhood story of imperfect love. The reason I think it's universal is for the child, for the growing child, there cannot be perfect love. In fact, people ask the question, are these stories of imperfect love true or are they not true? Here's why they are true. They are created, they are written. These are scripts written by a child living in a family. The reason that there's some wonderful thing that happens. The child gets to the age, somewhere around 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. They have the capacity to become a systems expert. They can read these systems as well as you and I can when you learn structural dynamics. They already know it. And the first creative act that we do as growing up is to write the story of imperfect love. It's a creative act. It's a creative story. Is it true? All creative stories are true. Right? They're true because we act as if they're true. And when you get to childhood stories of imperfect love, you've got a problem, because the story of love is also the story of identity. These are identity stories. This is who I am. I learn who I am from the system I am in, and I am writing a story about that, and this is my identity. So that's the first story, a great and important story. It never goes away. It is so hard to change. So when you get around to effecting durable change, we can change the face-to-face structures, but not easily do we change the story, the deeper stories about love. Out of the first story of imperfect love comes a second very important story. In those stories, there's something missing. Who is the hero? Who, if that hero were present, would make my story come out right? And so the proposition is that when we seek a lover, a partner, what we're looking for is the missing element, missing component of the childhood story of imperfect love. I call that the hero stories. And there are, again, the magical three. There are three hero stories. The fixer, the survivor, and the protector. And so there are two aspects of the hero story. One is the hero we are looking for. But the first thing, the hero I will be, and where as an adult I will be loved for who I am when the stakes get raised. I will be a hero, and I will come to the rescue of the world, or my partner, or my children. And the flip side of that is, who is my best partner? So when you think about yourselves and your relationships with other people, if you're responding to your own story of imperfect love and the hero story that comes out of it, think about mates you've chosen, and your disappointments because they have not met your expectations, which is true for most of us. We'll talk about that later if we want, but I'm going to sort of end with that. I haven't looked at my slides at all, but I told you what came out. Of all the organizational entities, the hardest one to change is the intimate relationship. It's the hardest of all. The reason, basically, if you want to just generalize, is there are two stories of love which cannot be met at the same time, and each person is asking the other to meet their requirements and their definition of love simultaneously, and it's impossible. It can't happen. And so they continue to fight. And struggle to try to be loved by others. So I wrote a paper. I've written a lot of papers. I wrote a paper somewhere around 1980, 81, 82 called Couples Therapy, Crisis Induction, and Change. And so I go through the 3 stages of therapy with couples. And in the second stage, what happens is you make progress. There is retrenchment, regression toward the mean. People go back to their baseline behavior and start all over again, gearing up for the next struggle, next fight. They get discouraged. One or the other wants a divorce or wants to quit. They're expecting me to go along with them. So I name the phenomenon. I call it challenging the basic premises of the relationship. What happens then in that second stage, when the 2 stories of love, we are going deep, into the deeper structures that create those structures I was talking about earlier, and the couple is ready to quit, and I say, not until you fire me. I ain't going. I ain't going because challenging the basic premises of the relationship occurs in all long-term interventions. And so, do I sometimes quit? Hardly ever. I arrange to get fired. So, what is resilience? I think it's the willingness to go back in there and start all over again.
Yeah.
What I left out of the story of that family, that system, was the bystander. And so a bystander in that system would say, this would be a sophisticated bystander, but something resembling this. The bystander in that system would say, Mom and Dad, this is all bullshit. I know that you really love each other, and you just don't know how to do it. I think you should take a walk, go on a vacation, come back, and let me off the hook. All right? That's a bystander. So, the rule. Any system without a functional bystander is a disabled system. Right? Here's why. What you need in a system is somebody to say, something's wrong here. I'm challenging it, the opposer. You must have an opposer, you have to have a mover and a follower, but you have to have an opposer and a bystander. Only the bystander can say, hey, boss, you have silenced the opposers. In dysfunctional systems, on any level, any context, any organizational context, if you've got a problem in the system, you've got a disabled bystander or a silenced bystander, and that means you silenced the opposer. Okay? Let's go back to the question. When you leave a system that you have tried to affect and improve, you have to leave behind an effective bystander. What the bystander says is, just as I was intimating with what that child said, we have a reason to hang in there. And without a bystander in complex human systems, resilience can break down, people divorce, companies fall apart, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's the bystander who gets the system motivated again to continue. And I really believe it's the bystander who accounts for resilience. In the last chapter of reading The Room, I addressed Obama, and I diagnosed Obama pretty thoroughly, explained what his theory of the thing was, what he learned at Harvard Law, his overcommitment to participatory democracy, and why it failed in this particular Congress. And so I tried to reach out to the larger community, the nation in this instance, and I ended the book with a memo inviting him to invite me in to help him to deal with his childhood story of imperfect love and how he let his father off the hook and blamed his mother, which is how he interpreted his childhood story. And so what I'm saying, Art, is I really believe that even as Putin and Obama are in conversation right now, if you look at the text of their reported dialogue, you can code the behavior, right? And so the answer is, I really believe that structural dynamics can reach to larger entities, to the nation, and I'm sorry to say it, but to the world.
Okay.
And I tried to do some of that in the book. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, David.